My name is Martha, and I'm 32 years old. I never thought I'd be sitting in my corner office on the 22nd floor of a Manhattan high-rise staring at my phone after receiving the worst news of my life. My father had just died of a sudden heart attack, and all I could think about was how I needed 3 days to give him the burial he deserved. The afternoon sunlight streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows, casting long shadows across my mahogany desk covered with financial reports that suddenly seemed meaningless. The city noise below felt distant as I processed the reality that Harold, the man who built Sterling and Associates from nothing, was gone. I wiped away a tear and straightened my blazer, knowing I had to face the hardest conversation of my career with the one person who held my professional fate in her hands. Before I tell you what happened next, let me know where you're watching from in the comments below, and please hit that like button and subscribe for more stories about family betrayal and unexpected victories that will leave you questioning everything you thought you knew about loyalty and power. Now let me take you back to that devastating moment when everything changed forever. Working at Sterling and Associates wasn't just a job for me. It was my legacy, my family's empire that my father Harold had built over 20 years of blood, sweat, and countless 18-hour days. As a senior financial analyst, specializing in mergers and acquisitions, I'd spent the last 10 years proving that I belonged in this world of power suits and million-dollar deals. But my position came with a complication that most people didn't have to navigate in their professional lives. My boss was Beverly, my 38-year-old sister-in-law who served as the company's CEO. She'd married my brother James 15 years ago, back when the company was just starting to gain serious traction in the New York financial scene. James, bless his heart, had never shown much interest in the family business. He preferred his art galleries and charity galas to spreadsheets and board meetings. So when Dad needed someone to help run operations, Beverly stepped in with her MBA from Wharton and her razor-sharp business instincts. The relationship between Beverly and me had always been complicated. She was brilliant, I had to give her that. Under her leadership, the company had expanded from a small boutique firm to one of the most respected financial consulting agencies in Manhattan. But there was always this underlying tension, this sense that she saw me as a threat to her authority. Maybe it was because Dad had always made it clear that he believed I had the best head for business in the family. Maybe it was because I'd worked my way up from intern to senior analyst through pure merit, while she'd married into her position. My office reflected the success I'd earned. The mahogany furniture matched the executive suite aesthetic, and my credentials hung on the wall next to awards for outstanding performance in client acquisition. Through my window, I could see Central Park in the distance, a reminder of how far our family had come from Dad's humble beginnings in Queens. File cabinets lined one wall, filled with documentation of deals I'd personally negotiated, acquisitions that had netted the company millions in fees. Beverly's management style was efficient but cold. She ran meetings with military precision and had little patience for what she called emotional decision-making. I'd watched her fire people without blinking, restructure entire departments based purely on numbers, and push through deals that made financial sense even if they hurt people along the way. Dad had always balanced the business side with genuine care for our employees, but Beverly saw that as weakness. The irony wasn't lost on me that the woman who controlled my career was married to a brother who barely acknowledged my professional existence. James treated family dinners like social obligations, always checking his phone and making excuses to leave early. He'd inherited Dad's artistic sensibilities, but none of his drive, content to live off dividends while contributing nothing meaningful to the company that bore our family name. As I sat in my office that terrible afternoon, gathering the courage to walk up one floor to Beverly's executive suite, I couldn't help but think about all the times Dad had pulled me aside to talk about the future of Sterling and Associates. He'd always spoken as if I'd have a bigger role someday, as if there were plans in motion that I wasn't quite ready to hear about yet. Those conversations felt like distant memories now overshadowed by the immediate crisis of needing time to mourn and arrange his funeral. The elevator ride to the 23rd floor felt longer than usual. Beverly's corner office was a study in modern minimalism, all glass and steel with a view that commanded respect from anyone who entered. Her assistant Diane looked up nervously as I approached, clearly sensing the gravity of the situation. I'd always liked Diane. She was one of the few people who treated me like family rather than just another employee, and I could see the sympathy in her eyes as she buzzed Beverly's office to announce my arrival. Beverly's office felt like a fishbowl with glass walls that offered a panoramic view of Manhattan's skyline, but no privacy for difficult conversations. She sat behind her imposing desk, perfectly composed, in a charcoal gray suit that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. Her blonde hair was pulled back in a severe bun, and her blue eyes held none of the warmth you'd expect from a family member delivering tragic news. "Martha," she said without looking up from her computer screen, "I heard about Harold. I'm sorry for your loss." The clinical way she referred to my father by his first name, instead of calling him Dad or even your father, struck me immediately. There was no emotion in her voice, no acknowledgement that the man who'd given her the opportunity to build her career had just died. "Thank you." I managed my voice steadier than I felt. "I'm going to need 3 days off to handle the funeral arrangements and burial. The service will be this Friday at St. Patrick's Cathedral, and I know Dad would have wanted the whole company family there." Beverly finally looked up from her screen, and I saw something in her expression that made my stomach drop. It wasn't grief or understanding. It was irritation. "Death is part of life, Martha," she said, her tone as cold as the marble floors beneath my feet. "Business doesn't stop because we're sad. We have the Nakamura Industries deal closing this week. $39 million in client assets are depending on your analysis being perfect and your presentation being flawless." I stared at her, unable to believe what I was hearing. "Beverly, my father just died. The man who built this company, who gave you everything you have, is gone. Surely the Japanese investors will understand if we postpone for a few days." She leaned back in her leather chair, studying me like I was a disappointing quarterly report. "The Japanese don't postpone for personal problems. They expect American professionalism, which means showing up regardless of what's happening in your private life. I've spent 18 months cultivating this relationship, and I won't let emotional decision-making destroy it." Emotional decision-making. The words came out sharper than I intended. "Beverly, this is my father's funeral. This isn't about emotions. It's about respect and basic human decency." "Here's what I know about respect," Beverly said, standing up and walking to the floor-to-ceiling windows that overlook the city. "Respect is earned by keeping your commitments, by putting the company's needs above your personal wants. Your father understood that. He worked through his own father's funeral because he had responsibilities to his clients." I knew that story, and Beverly was twisting it. Dad had worked through Grandpa's funeral because the company was 3 months old and couldn't afford to lose its only major client. We weren't in that position now. Sterling and Associates was financially stable with a client base that respected our family values. "The situation was completely different then," I said, fighting to keep my voice professional. "We were struggling to survive. Now we're established. Our clients know us as a family company that values relationships over pure profit." Beverly turned back to face me, and I saw something I'd never noticed before. Behind her polished exterior was genuine resentment, years of feeling like an outsider in a family business despite her title and authority. "Choose Martha," she said, her words cutting through the air like ice. "Work or family. You can't have both. If you're not here tomorrow morning at 8 sharp, prepared to finalize the Nakamura presentation, then you're choosing to prioritize personal matters over professional obligations. And in my company, that choice has consequences." The way she said "my company" made everything crystal clear. This wasn't about the Japanese deal or company policy. This was about power, about proving once and for all that she controlled my destiny at Sterling and Associates. I could hear Diane typing nervously at her desk outside, probably trying to pretend she wasn't listening to every word. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across Beverly's office, and I found myself thinking about all the times Dad had told me that family loyalty was the foundation of everything we'd built. "I need to think about this," I said, finally knowing that my response would determine not just my career, but the entire future of our family's company. Beverly smiled, but there was no warmth in it. You have until tomorrow morning to decide. But remember, Martha, there are plenty of talented financial analysts in New York. None of them are irreplaceable. As I walked toward the door, I heard her pick up her phone and dial James's number. Her voice carried across the glass-walled office as she said, "Your sister is having trouble prioritizing her responsibilities. Maybe you can talk some sense into her." I didn't wait to hear the rest of the conversation. The elevator doors closed behind me, and I found myself alone with a choice that would change everything. Back in my office, I sat in the leather chair Dad had given me for my promotion to senior analyst, surrounded by the awards and certificates that represented 10 years of dedicated service. The irony wasn't lost on me that I was being forced to choose between honoring the man who'd made my career possible and keeping the job he'd helped me build. I started mechanically packing my personal items into a cardboard box, not because I'd made my decision yet, but because I needed to keep my hands busy while my mind processed Beverly's ultimatum. Family photos went in first, then the small plant Dad had brought me from his own office, then the coffee mug with Sterling and Associates logo that I'd used every morning for 5 years. As I reached for the bottom drawer of my desk, my fingers found the key to my personal filing cabinet, the one Dad had insisted I get when I was promoted. "Always keep your most important documents secure," he told me. "You never know when you'll need them." Inside the cabinet, beneath my copies of performance reviews and salary negotiations, I found an envelope with my name written in Dad's distinctive handwriting. My hands trembled as I opened it, revealing documents I'd never seen before, and a letter that would change everything I thought I knew about my position at the company. The first document was a stock transfer agreement dated 3 years ago and notarized by our family attorney. According to the paperwork, Dad had quietly transferred 39% of Sterling and Associates directly to me, making me the largest individual shareholder in the company. Beverly owned 31% through her marriage to James. James himself held 20%, and the remaining 10% was distributed among smaller investors. The second document was even more shocking. It was a copy of Dad's will, specifically the section dealing with company ownership. In the event of his death, his remaining shares would be distributed equally between James and me, but the 39% he'd already transferred would remain mine without any conditions or limitations. But it was the handwritten letter that made me understand the full scope of what Dad had been planning. "Martha, if you're reading this, something has happened to me and you found yourself in a position where you need to know the truth about Sterling and Associates. You were always the one who truly understood this business, who shared my vision of building something that serves families rather than just generating profits. I've been watching Beverly run the company for years, and while she's competent, she's forgotten that our strength comes from our values, not just our bottom line. These shares are yours by right and by merit. You've earned them through your dedication, your integrity, and your genuine care for our clients and employees. Beverly doesn't know about this transfer. I wanted you to have the security of ownership before you ever needed to use it. The company needs leadership that remembers why we started this business in the first place. Use this power wisely and remember that true success isn't measured by profit margins, but by the positive impact we have on people's lives. I love you, and I believe in you more than you know. Harold." I read the letter 3 times before the full implications sank in. Beverly had just threatened to fire me from a company I actually owned the controlling interest in. She'd been operating under the assumption that she held the real power, while Dad had quietly ensured that I had the authority to make decisions about our family's legacy. My phone rang, interrupting my thoughts. It was Thomas Chen, our family attorney, and Dad's longtime friend. "Martha, I just heard about Harold. I'm so sorry for your loss. He was a good man and a dear friend." "Thank you, Thomas. I actually just found some documents in my office that I think you prepared. Stock transfers and ownership papers." There was a pause before Thomas responded. "He told you to look in your filing cabinet if something happened to him. Those documents are completely legal and binding. Harold set up that transfer 3 years ago after he started having concerns about the company's direction under Beverly's leadership. Did he ever say anything specific about why he was worried? He felt that Beverly had lost sight of the company's core values. She was pushing for aggressive expansion and cost-cutting measures that would have compromised the personalized service that built your reputation. Harold wanted to make sure you had the authority to steer the company back toward its founding principles if necessary. I looked out my window at the bustling city below, thinking about Beverly's ultimatum and Dad's letter. Thomas, hypothetically, what would happen if I called an emergency board meeting? With 39% ownership, you have the right to call for a vote on company leadership at any time. If you can get the board's support, you could restructure the entire executive team. But Martha, that's a nuclear option. It would mean war with Beverly, and potentially with James. What if the war has already started? I asked, thinking about Beverly's cold dismissal of my need to bury my father. What if I'm just now realizing I've been fighting with one hand tied behind my back? After I hung up with Thomas, I sat alone in my office as the sun set over Manhattan. The choice Beverly had forced on me suddenly seemed much simpler. She'd asked me to choose between work and family, not realizing that honoring my father's memory and protecting his legacy were the same thing. I picked up my phone and started dialing the board members' numbers. It was time to call an emergency meeting. The Sterling and Associates boardroom on the 25th floor had hosted some of the most important decisions in our company's history, but nothing quite like what was about to unfold. By 7 p.m., I'd managed to reach all 5 independent board members, plus Thomas Chen representing the family's legal interests. The mahogany conference table gleamed under the overhead lights, and the city sparkled through the floor-to-ceiling windows like a backdrop for the corporate drama about to unfold. Beverly arrived 20 minutes late, clearly annoyed at being summoned to an unscheduled meeting. She walked in wearing a different suit than she'd had on earlier, suggesting she'd gone home and changed before coming back to deal with what she probably assumed was my desperate attempt to negotiate more time off. "I hope this is important, Martha," she said, taking her usual seat at the head of the table. "I had dinner plans with James tonight." "It's important," I said, standing up with the folder of documents Dad had left me. "I called this meeting because there are some ownership issues that need to be clarified before we can move forward with company operations." The board members looked puzzled. Dr. Patricia Williams, who'd been with us since the early days, leaned forward with concern. "Ownership issues. Is this about Harold's estate planning?" "In a way," I said, pulling out the stock transfer documents. "It's about ownership structure that apparently hasn't been properly disclosed to the board or to current management." I watched Beverly's face carefully as I explained the documents. Her confident expression shifted to confusion, then to something approaching panic as she realized what I was telling them. "That's impossible," she said, reaching for the papers. "Harold never mentioned any stock transfers. I would have known about something that significant." Thomas Chen cleared his throat. "Beverly Harold was under no legal obligation to disclose private stock transfers to company management. These documents are properly notarized and legally binding. Martha has been the majority shareholder for 3 years. The room fell silent except for the sound of Beverly frantically shuffling through the paperwork, looking for some flaw or loophole that would invalidate what she was seeing. Board member Robert Martinez whistled low under his breath. 39%, he said. "That makes Martha the largest single shareholder. Beverly, what percentage do you control?" 31% through my marriage to James," Beverly said, her voice tight with barely controlled anger. "But this doesn't change anything operationally. I'm still the CEO. I still run day-to-day operations." "Actually," I said, opening Dad's letter and reading from it, "I think we need to discuss whether current leadership is aligned with the company's founding values and long-term interests." That's when James walked in looking confused and slightly out of breath. Beverly must have called him after I'd started contacting board members. "What's going on?" he asked, loosening his tie as he took a seat beside Beverly. Beverly said there was some kind of emergency meeting about ownership. I looked at my brother, this man who'd inherited Dad's artistic temperament, but had never shown much interest in the business that supported his comfortable lifestyle. James, did you know that Dad transferred 39% of the company to me 3 years ago? James looked genuinely surprised. No, but honestly, I never paid much attention to the business side of things. Dad always said you were the one with the head for it. He paused, studying the documents I'd laid out. Wait, if Martha has 39% and Beverly has 31 and I have 20, then Martha actually controls the company. That's exactly what it means, Thomas confirmed. Martha has had controlling interest for 3 years. She could have called for board votes on major decisions at any time. Beverly's composure finally cracked. This is ridiculous. Harold never said anything about questioning my leadership. If he had problems with how I was running things, he should have spoken to me directly. Maybe he tried, I said, thinking about all the times I'd seen Dad look frustrated after executive meetings. Maybe he was hoping you'd remember that Sterling and Associates was built on treating people like family, not just profit centers. Dr. Williams spoke up. Martha, what exactly are you proposing? I took a deep breath, knowing that my next words would change everything for our family and our company. I'm proposing that we vote on new leadership structure effective immediately. I think the events of today have shown that current management has lost sight of the values that built this company. Beverly shot to her feet. You can't be serious. You're going to destroy everything we've built because I couldn't give you time off for a funeral. This is emotional decision-making at its worst. No, I said, standing to face her. This is about remembering that we're a family company and family comes first, always. Dad built this business to provide security and opportunity for people he cared about. Today you told me I had to choose between work and family, as if they were opposing forces. Dad never saw it that way. James, who'd been quiet throughout most of the meeting, suddenly spoke up. Beverly, you really told Martha she couldn't take time off for Dad's funeral. I told her she needed to prioritize her responsibilities, Beverly said defensively. The Nakamura deal is worth $39 million. We can't just postpone million-dollar deals for personal matters. Personal matters. James's voice rose with an anger I rarely heard from him. Our father died, Beverly. The man who gave you everything you have in your career died, and you called it a personal matter. The room fell silent as the weight of Beverly's words settled on everyone present. Even the board members, who'd maintained professional neutrality throughout the discussion, looked uncomfortable with her characterization of Dad's death. I move to vote on new leadership, I said formally. All in favor of restructuring the executive team with Martha Sterling as interim CEO. One by one, hands went up around the table. Dr. Williams, Robert Martinez. The other 3 board members, Thomas Chen, and finally, to everyone's surprise, James. James, Beverly said, her voice breaking slightly. You're voting against your own wife. I'm voting for what Dad would have wanted, James said quietly. He always believed Martha should have more control over the company. I never cared about the business side, but I care about doing right by his memory. The vote was 6-1, with only Beverly voting against the leadership change. In a matter of 2 hours, I'd gone from facing termination to running the company that bore my family name. My first decision as interim CEO was announced immediately. Sterling and Associates will be closed for the next 3 days, so that all employees can attend Harold Sterling's funeral and pay their respects to the man who built everything we have. When we reopen, we'll be implementing new policies that ensure no employee ever has to choose between work and family again. Beverly gathered her things in silence, but before she left, she turned back to face me one last time. You think you've won something here, Martha, but running a company isn't about being popular or making people feel good. It's about making hard decisions that keep the business profitable. You'll learn that soon enough. As the boardroom emptied, I found myself alone with the weight of new responsibility and the satisfaction of knowing I'd honored Dad's memory in the most meaningful way possible. The city lights twinkled outside, and I could almost feel Dad's presence approving of what had just happened. The next morning, news of the leadership change spread through Sterling and Associates like wildfire. I arrived at 7 a.m. to find Diane, Beverly's former assistant, waiting outside what was now my office with a stack of messages and a nervous smile. "Good morning, Ms. Sterling," she said. "I wanted to congratulate you on your promotion and let you know that I've handled the initial calls from clients and media about yesterday's board meeting." "Thank you, Diane. How are people responding?" "Better than you might expect," she said, handing me the message slips. 3 clients called specifically to say they were glad the company would be honoring Harold's memory with the temporary closure. The Wall Street Journal wants to interview you about family succession in financial services companies. As I settled into what had been Beverly's office just 24 hours earlier, I made a decision to redecorate immediately. The cold, minimalist aesthetic was being replaced with warmth that reflected Dad's approach to business. Family photos went up on the walls, along with awards the company had won for client service and community involvement. My first executive decision involved calling the Japanese investors who Beverly had been so concerned about. I reached Hiroshi Nakamura at his Tokyo office and explained the situation with complete transparency. "Mr. Nakamura, I'm calling to inform you that we've had a leadership transition at Sterling and Associates. My father, the company founder, passed away yesterday, and I've been appointed as interim CEO. I wanted to personally assure you that our commitment to your project remains unchanged, but we will need to postpone our scheduled meeting by 1 week to allow our team to attend his funeral." There was a pause before Nakamura responded, but when he did, his tone was respectful and understanding. "Ms. Sterling, please accept my condolences on your father's passing. In Japanese culture, honoring our ancestors is of paramount importance. Nakamura Industries completely supports your decision to prioritize family obligations. We look forward to working with you when you're ready." After hanging up, I realized that Beverly's fear about losing the Japanese deal had been completely unfounded. Professional clients understood and respected family values when they were presented with honesty and integrity. The funeral preparations took on new meaning, knowing that I was planning them as the head of Dad's company rather than as an employee asking for permission to grieve. St. Patrick's Cathedral was booked for Friday morning, and I sent personal invitations to every Sterling and Associates employee, client, and business partner who had known Dad. By Wednesday afternoon, the company's main conference room had been converted into a memorial space where employees could share stories about Harold Sterling and sign a book of remembrances for the family. The response was overwhelming. People talked about how Dad had remembered their children's names, helped them through personal financial crises, and treated them like extended family rather than just workers. Janet Martinez from accounting wrote, "Harold once drove me to the hospital when my son was in an accident, then stayed until morning to make sure everything was okay. He never mentioned it again, but I never forgot that kindness." Kevin Walsh from our IT department shared, "When I was going through my divorce, Harold quietly arranged for the company to advance me money for legal fees, then set up a payment plan that didn't put any financial pressure on me. He saved my life during the darkest period I've ever faced." Story after story revealed the same pattern Dad had consistently put people before profits, building loyalty through genuine care rather than just competitive salaries. Reading these tributes made me understand why Beverly's leadership style had felt so wrong even when it was producing good financial results. Thursday evening, James came to my office carrying 2 cups of coffee and wearing an expression I hadn't seen from him in years. He looked like he'd been thinking deeply about family relationships and his own role in recent events. "I owe you an apology," he said, settling into the chair across from my desk. "I should have stood up to Beverly years ago when I saw how she was treating you. I was comfortable letting someone else run the business, but I should have paid attention to whether they were honoring Dad's values." "James, you don't need to apologize. We all deal with grief and responsibility in different ways." "No, Martha, I do need to apologize. Beverly has been poisoning me against you for years, making comments about how you were trying to undermine her authority or questioning her decisions behind her back. I believed her because it was easier than getting involved in company politics." This revelation didn't surprise me. but hearing James acknowledge it felt like a weight lifting off my shoulders. What made you change your mind? Yesterday, when she said Dad's funeral was a personal matter, I finally saw her the way you must have been seeing her all along. Dad wasn't just the company founder to us, he was our father. The fact that she could be so cold about his death made me realize she'd never really understood what our family business was supposed to represent. We sat in comfortable silence for a moment, looking out at the city lights and processing how much had changed in just 3 days. Finally, James spoke again. I want you to know that you have my complete support as CEO. I know I haven't been involved in the business side, but if there's anything I can do to help honor Dad's legacy, just ask. Actually, I said, thinking about the memorial service and the stories employees had been sharing, I think Dad would want you to be more involved. Not necessarily in daily operations, but in making sure we never lose sight of the human side of what we do. You have his heart for people, even if you don't have his head for numbers. That night I stayed late in the office working on the eulogy I would deliver at Dad's funeral. But more than that, I was drafting new company policies that would institutionalize the values he'd built Sterling and Associates on. Mandatory bereavement leave emergency family funds for employees facing crises and performance reviews that would measure not just financial results, but also how managers treated their teams. The transformation of Sterling and Associates had begun, and it would be built on the foundation Dad had always envisioned success measured not just by profit margins, but by positive impact on people's lives. 6 months after Dad's funeral, the changes at Sterling and Associates had exceeded everyone's expectations, including my own. The company had not only maintained its financial performance, but had actually improved in both revenue and client satisfaction. The Nakamura Industries deal had closed successfully with the Japanese investors, specifically citing our family values and transparent communication as reasons they chose to expand their partnership with us. But success hadn't come without its challenges, particularly regarding Beverly's role in the new company structure. She'd remained in New York, taking a position with a competing firm that had lasted exactly 3 months before she was let go for what her new employers diplomatically called cultural misalignment. The truth was that Beverly's management style, which had seemed acceptable in the fast-paced world of corporate finance, didn't translate well to companies that prioritized long-term relationships over short-term gains. I was reviewing quarterly reports when Diane buzzed my office intercom. Ms. Sterling Beverly is here to see you. She doesn't have an appointment, but she said it's important. My first instinct was to have Diane schedule a formal meeting for later in the week, but something in her tone suggested this couldn't wait. Send her in, please. Beverly entered my office looking like a shadow of her former self. Her usually perfect appearance was slightly disheveled, her confidence replaced by something that looked uncomfortably like desperation. She took the chair across from my desk without being invited, a breach of professional etiquette that would have been unthinkable 6 months ago. Martha, I need to talk to you about coming back to Sterling and Associates. The directness of her request caught me off guard. Beverly, you left the company under difficult circumstances. I'm not sure that coming back is realistic. I know I made mistakes, she said, and for the first time since I'd known her, Beverly's voice carried genuine vulnerability. The way I handled Harold's death, the ultimatum I gave you, the way I treated employees over the years, I was wrong about a lot of things. I studied her face looking for signs of manipulation or calculated strategy, but what I saw instead was exhaustion and what appeared to be genuine regret. What happened at Morrison Financial? Beverly's composure cracked slightly. They fired me after I tried to implement cost-cutting measures that would have eliminated their employee wellness programs. The managing partner said, I didn't understand that their success came from treating people like family, not just profit centers. She paused, meeting my eyes directly. He said, I should learn from companies like Sterling and Associates that had figured out how to balance profitability with human values. The irony wasn't lost on either of us. Beverly had been fired for trying to implement exactly the kind of policies she'd championed at our company, while Sterling and Associates was thriving under the more compassionate approach she'd dismissed as emotional decision-making. Beverly, I appreciate you coming here, and I can hear that you've learned some difficult lessons over the past few months, but I need to understand what you're really asking for. I'm asking for a chance to prove that I can be the kind of leader Harold always wanted me to be, she said. I know I can't expect to walk back into a senior executive role, but I'm hoping you might consider letting me start over in a position where I can rebuild trust and show that I've changed. This conversation was not what I'd expected when I became CEO. Beverly had been the antagonist in my story, the person whose coldness had forced me to make the hardest decision of my professional life. But sitting across from her now, I saw someone who was genuinely grappling with the consequences of prioritizing ambition over empathy. I have an opportunity that might interest you, I said after a long pause. We're opening a new subsidiary focused on financial consulting for small family businesses. It would require someone with strong analytical skills, but also the ability to understand that these clients need advisors who care about their personal stories, not just their bottom lines. Beverly's eyes widened with surprise. You'd consider giving me another chance. I'd consider giving you the opportunity to prove that you've learned from your mistakes. The position would report to James, who's agreed to oversee our family business division. Your compensation would be significantly lower than what you earned as CEO, and your performance would be measured not just by revenue generation, but by client satisfaction and employee feedback. Why would you offer me this? Beverly asked. After everything that happened, why would you trust me with any role in the company? I thought about Dad's letter about his belief that success should be measured by positive impact on people's lives. Because people deserve second chances when they're genuinely committed to change. And because I think Harold would have wanted me to give you the opportunity to become the leader he always hoped you could be. Beverly sat quietly for several minutes, clearly processing the unexpected nature of my offer. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. I was jealous of you for years, she admitted. Harold respected your instincts and trusted your judgment in ways he never did with me. I had the title and the authority, but you had his confidence. That jealousy made me make decisions based on proving my power, rather than doing what was best for the company. Beverly Harold didn't trust my judgment because I was his daughter. He trusted it because I consistently prioritized the company's values over my personal advancement. That's something anyone can choose to do regardless of their relationship to the founder. She nodded slowly. I'd like to accept your offer if it's still available. I want the chance to prove that I can put the company's mission ahead of my own ego. There's one condition, I said. You'll need to personally apologize to every employee you treated unfairly during your time as CEO. Not a general statement or a company-wide memo, but individual conversations where you acknowledge specific instances and commit to doing better. Beverly's face flushed, but she nodded acceptance. That's fair. It won't be easy, but it's the right thing to do. As she prepared to leave, Beverly turned back one more time. Martha, for what it's worth, Harold would be proud of the leader you've become. You proved that someone can be strong and compassionate at the same time. I wish I'd learned that lesson years ago. After Beverly left, I sat alone in my office thinking about forgiveness, second chances, and the complexity of human relationships in professional settings. The decision to offer her another opportunity hadn't been easy, but it felt consistent with the values Dad had built the company on. That evening, I called James to discuss Beverly's potential return and his feelings about supervising his ex-wife in a professional capacity. His response surprised me with its maturity. If she's genuinely changed, then she deserves the chance to prove it, he said. And honestly, Martha, watching how you've handled this whole situation has made me realize that holding grudges just perpetuates cycles of hurt. Dad always said that forgiveness wasn't about excusing bad behavior, but about freeing yourself from the burden of anger. The transformation of Sterling and Associates continued, but now it included the possibility that even former adversaries could find redemption through genuine commitment to change. 2 years later, I found myself in Dad's old office, which I'd renovated to honor his memory while making it my own. His portrait hung on the wall behind my desk, and I'd kept his favorite coffee mug on the bookshelf as a daily reminder of the values he'd instilled in both the company and in me. The mahogany furniture remained, but I'd added warmer lighting and family photos that made the space feel more welcoming to employees and clients alike. Sterling and Associates had grown beyond anything Dad had imagined when he started the company 25 years earlier. Our client base had expanded to include not just high net worth individuals, but also small family businesses, nonprofit organizations, and even some international clients who'd heard about our unique approach to relationship-based financial consulting. Revenue had increased by 32% over 2 years, but more importantly, employee satisfaction surveys showed the highest ratings in company history. The success had brought opportunities I'd never expected. Harvard Business School had invited me to speak about values-based leadership in family businesses. The Wall Street Journal had featured Sterling and Associates in a cover story about companies that were proving profitability and compassion could coexist. 3 competing firms had tried to recruit me with offers that would have doubled my salary, but I couldn't imagine working anywhere else. Beverly's journey back to professional credibility had been slower but genuine. Her work with family business clients had revealed a side of her personality that had been buried under years of corporate ambition. She'd developed a reputation for understanding the emotional complexities of family-owned companies, helping them navigate succession planning and conflict resolution with empathy and expertise. Her personal apologies to former colleagues had been difficult, but healing for everyone involved. James had surprised everyone, including himself, by discovering a talent for the human resources and employee development side of the business. His artistic background had given him insights into creativity and motivation that translated well to managing people. He'd implemented mentoring programs, employee recognition initiatives, and professional development opportunities that had significantly reduced turnover and increased job satisfaction. But the most meaningful change had been the establishment of the Harold Sterling Memorial Fund, which provided emergency financial assistance to employees facing family crises. The fund had helped 17 families over 2 years, covering everything from medical expenses to funeral costs to emergency child care. Every time we distributed assistance, I thought about Dad's belief that taking care of people was the foundation of sustainable business success. That afternoon, as I reviewed applications for our summer internship program, designed specifically for students from underprivileged backgrounds, Diane knocked on my office door. "Martha, there's someone here to see you. She doesn't have an appointment, but she says it's about Harold and the early days of the company." The visitor was Eleanor Patterson, an elderly woman who'd been Dad's secretary during Sterling and Associates' first 5 years. She carried a small wooden box and wore the kind of smile that suggested she had a story to share. "Miss Eleanor," I said, standing to embrace her, "it's so wonderful to see you. What brings you here today?" "I've been cleaning out my attic and I found some things that belong to your father. He asked me to keep them safe years ago, and I think you should have them now." Inside the wooden box were handwritten notes Dad had made during the company's earliest days. His thoughts on business philosophy, his hopes for the future, and his concerns about maintaining integrity as the company grew. One note dated 15 years earlier made me catch my breath. "The real test of Sterling and Associates won't be whether we can make money, but whether we can make money while making people's lives better. If Martha ever runs this company, I hope she'll remember that our success is measured not by what we accumulate, but by what we contribute to the families and communities we serve." Miss Eleanor watched me read, nodding with satisfaction. "Your father knew you'd end up running this place someday. He used to say that you had his head for numbers but your mother's heart for people, and that combination would make you a better leader than he'd ever been." As evening approached and the office grew quiet, I remained at my desk thinking about the journey that had brought me to this moment. 2 years ago, I'd been forced to choose between work and family, not realizing that honoring family values was the key to creating meaningful work. The $39 million deal that Beverly had been so concerned about had been just the beginning. Under value-based leadership, Sterling and Associates had become something Dad had always envisioned, but never quite achieved a company that generated significant profits while genuinely improving people's lives. The city lights twinkled outside my windows, the same view Dad had looked at when he was building his dream from nothing. I picked up my phone and called James, Beverly, and the senior staff to invite them for an informal dinner meeting the next evening. It was time to start planning the next phase of Sterling and Associates' growth, but with the same commitment to family values that had transformed us from a good company into a great one. Looking at Dad's portrait one more time before leaving the office, I whispered, "We did it, Dad. We proved that you don't have to choose between work and family. When you honor both, they make each other stronger." The Harold Sterling Memorial Fund had grown to help over 50 families. Our employee retention rate was 94%, the highest in our industry. Client satisfaction scores consistently exceeded 98%. And most importantly, every person who worked at Sterling and Associates knew they were valued not just for their productivity, but for their humanity. As I gathered my things to head home, I realized that the choice Beverly had forced me to make between work and family had been a false dilemma from the beginning. The real choice had been between leadership styles, one that saw people as resources to be managed, and one that saw them as human beings to be cherished. Dad's $39 million trust hadn't just given me control of the company. It had given me the opportunity to prove that businesses built on love and respect could be more successful than those built on fear and competition. Have you ever faced a situation where someone forced you to choose between your personal values and professional success? What would you do if you discovered you had more power than you realized to change a toxic situation? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more real-life stories about family betrayal and the unexpected ways that standing up for what's right can change everything. Share this video with someone who might need to hear that choosing family doesn't mean sacrificing success, it means redefining what success actually looks like. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is walk away from people who don't value what matters most to you. May you always have the courage to choose love over fear, and may your choices create the kind of legacy that makes the people you care about proud.